Welcome, everybody. Today we have an interview with Zachary Moulder of Mark of Eternity, one of the first books from our subscription here. And Zach, take it away. Tell us about yourself.
Well, I was just say thanks for having me, and also thanks for giving my little book a chance. I never thought I would have such an opportunity when I was finishing it at roughly this time last year. Yeah, so Mark of Eternity is just like it's very much just like a culmination of probably the last 20 years or so of me liking general sci-fi stuff, and I've just finally managed to sort like my procrastination out and actually finally put together a story that is actually finished rather than the typical mountains of work in progresses that are banished to oblivion that we all suffer so much from.
And this is your first book, if I'm thinking correctly, right? Or at least the first one that you've published.
This is my very first one that I've finished and published. It took me about 2 years, I think, from like initial concept to obviously the final product that everyone has read and hopefully enjoyed.
That's honestly, that's crazy. Like, congratulations again on a story well done and everything. It was a page turner to say the least. And I think it's really like, do you have any background in writing or anything? Because I find it really interesting that you went from like to this being your debut novel.
Um, Mostly it's just me just sort of doing my own thing, really. Like for a good while, I was just in my own bubble. Like I didn't set up any social media till after I'd actually published it. So before then, I was sort of just doing my own thing. The only like probably outside input was during, I think it was about a semester or two when I went to university. I majored in writing, but that didn't last very long, and then I left to join my current employment, which I enjoy a lot more than university.
So when I was reading Mark of Eternity, one of the first things that struck me was the prose, just the moment-to-moment writing, the descriptive text and stuff. But for a debut novel, I thought it was especially impressive then. You seem to have developed already a bit of a style. It's very visual. There's a really clear voice to it. But I really liked in particular the way that everything on the planet was constantly decaying, rotting, everything was breaking down, breaking apart. So was there any authors or any inspirations that you had for the way that you write? Like, or have you developed your style just over years of practice?
Well, I'd say my biggest inspiration for writing style would be the many authors who write for the Black Library series or the Black Library books. So,
Ah,
the Horus Heresy, Warhammer 40k, a bit of Age of Sigma, like all that. That's obviously where all the decaying and rotting away has come from. That's for like my general
yeah.
writing prose and stuff. Um, and for like for Mark of Eternity itself, like I can actually draw its inspiration back to a single point where I was having a movie night with some mates, and it was like a sci-fi night. So we're watching a few like classic sci-fi movies, and Aliens came on, and like literally like the scene I could pick was like right at the beginning where I think it's a rover. I literally just cop based a rover on whatever vehicle that was that family was driving, and it was raining like super heavily. It was a night world, and I was like, that's pretty cool. I could I could do something with that.
Yeah, I can see those influences directly, and I got that sense of vast setting and just a small story in that setting. There was obviously a lot had happened. I think it's 10,000 years or something. They've been adrift
Yeah.
in the story right before they finally crash. So the sense of isolation throughout, where they weren't just on their own on this planet, they were on their own in time. Like they were so far removed from any other thing. So it was really impressive, that sense of isolation. I really loved that. Was there a is there a wider universe out there in your head, or is it just hinted at and we'll maybe get more of it later? Like, is it something that you've thought about for a while?
Oh, definitely. I'd say almost all of the stories that I want to write are going to exist in the same universe, stretching from where I sort of see Mark of Eternity as like a central point. and then they'll be going back and like, you know, there'll be stories from way back in prehistory, and then stories all the way back to like the literal like end of the universe sort of thing, and they're all going to be meshed together with like either characters or like plot lines or something, all like melding with each other, and really just creating like one like cohesive plot line that flows like throughout the eons.
See, I love that, because I think especially the idea of the eternity, because I find it so interesting, because so many times you have these space or these sci-fi novels, these sci-fi stories where everyone's just put to sleep. But you had it where people were just living, like they were born on the eternity and they will die on the eternity. And I can't imagine the culture that they created, the lives that they had whilst just being on a ship. And like that ship is home, that ship is where their history is coming from, that ship is where their future is coming from. And I remember at one point I was reading and being like, oh man, imagine being a generation that died right before they arrived, because you know what happened. Like
It would have, yeah.
I think it's really, really cool how you played into that as well. I think that was a really unique aspect that stood out to me.
Yeah, or because like I could have taken the easy route and done cryostasis or, you know, faster than light travel, but I sort of like to try and keep it a bit grounded in real, like a bit realistic as well. So like, yeah, like FPL travel, like in future books, yes, but for like the first ships that went out from Earth, they just had to fall back on the, the pretty much the tested idea of colony ships, just, well, if you can't, and you can't really spend all that energy and resources freezing them, well, it's like, well, why not just have people live, like live out their lives, like pretty much as like a natural form of cryostasis. Really, it's like sort of like a morbid way of putting it. So like, and really, like, because yeah, as you said, like that the generations after they left but before they arrived were really just like placeholders for the end product.
Mhm. Was that ever something? Because I know when I was reading it, that was something where I think a part of me was like, I hope there's a prequel that just talks about like life on the ship itself. Um, I'm trying to think of it. That whole idea reminded me of, I don't know if you've read Becky Chambers, but a similar kind of like humans are stranded on, like they're basically roamer. Sorry, excuse me. They're basically rovers because like they've destroyed their own planet and now they're just stuck on a few ships trying to find somewhere to go. I was wondering if you had any plans to expand like life within the eternity as well.
Oh, absolutely. I can't say that I've read um that series, but yeah, I do see what you mean. I do intend on having a book or two set on the eternity itself, as well as some stories leading up to it, like its creation, the people behind it who made it, as well as sort of like a bit more information on what the core, like the heart of eternity really is.
Spud.
Yeah, there's a lot of references to kind of bigger things going on. Just
Yeah.
even in the way that the ship behaves, that the ship has a mind of its own and stuff. There's allusions to it to AI. I wouldn't say so much it's an AI story, but there's certainly a lot of AI questions that are raised in Mark of Eternity, which I think it would be really cool to explore. I'd love to read something set on the Eternity as well. The idea of a colony ship's both like existentially horrifying, but also like probably the most believable way to get that many people across space. I also thought it was very. I've only just realised how apt it is that those that last generation of colonists had the climax of a long journey stolen away from them somewhat. But
Yeah.
we'll wait until we won't talk about the ending just yet. We'll get to that in a little second. But there was a lot of bold choices, like the ending in the book. I thought, like, were you ever nervous about having a child be the main character, given how that tends to go down?
Not really, because the way I sort of wrote it, when I initially wrote it, Eve was a lot older than she was. I mean, she would have been easily maybe 16 or 17. But then I think with the way the story would have played out, it didn't really make it as soul crushing, I suppose. So I had to like, yeah, so I had to bump it down a bit. But like, I sort of get what you mean. Like, I've read way too many stories where like young characters are just annoying and just like kills like the whole vibe of the whole book that you're reading. But I tried to tap into a bit of her youth, but also not make her too annoying. Because real life kids are annoying, but they're also like I said, I have a brother 10 years younger than me, so I had to deal with that. But yeah, and then yeah, but they're a critical part of society as you can clearly see with the eternity.
Well, I think it's also I agree with you. I think it's also the case of like that innocence, like she wants to stay on the planet. The planet is her home. So that whole idea of like you don't know what else is out there, you don't like this can't be your home, kind of like. But I was gonna ask, so now we know you wanted Eve to be a little bit older. That was the initial plan. Were there any like, because like Steve said, you had some pretty bold choices for the story itself. Was that at any point, was that the direction you were always going to take it in? Or was it like a toss up to the last minute? Or how did you decide like this is how I want it to be?
The story it pretty much stayed the same the whole way. So I knew that the ending was going to be how it was, and that it was going to be a lot of for like conflict in between the family and stuff. And it was just more of like changing things around. Like the biggest change I can really say was Nisma and Eli. Their roles were actually swapped when I first wrote it.
Oh,
But then I realized that was a little too antagonizing of Eli to be like that. So that's why I swapped it back around. But the biggest changes I faced with the book was the format of anything, because I started it as a novella, and then partway through I was thinking this would be cool as a comic. So then I started making it as a comic. There's actually a few pages of it like illustrated as a comic. I hired a really good artist on Fiverr. His name eludes me right now, which is terrible, but yeah, I got a few pages done. Then I was thinking, this is going to get really expensive really quick. And words are just a lot cheaper than pictures. So then I went back to that. I had I'd actually finished the story like in comic script format. And then I pretty much just had that up and then Word document. And then I was writing it out. So I pretty much just took the dialogue and I was, all right, so now I got to try and set this dialogue into a scene. So I pretty much just almost entirely copied all the dialogue over from the comic script and into the story. It's just a matter of all the visual stuff that would have been covered by the illustrations. I had to fill in with words then.
That's really cool that it almost started as a comic. Because there's anyone who's read it will know that there's great illustrations throughout the book. So those illustrations in the book were what kind of survived from the comic. Am I right?
No, actually. That was a different artist, Dawn Trang of Fiverr. She's really a talented artist. She did extremely well with what I gave her, and obviously that it shows in it as well. Like she did the cover as well. Just I love the black and white art style that she does. But those were actually the result of me trying to pursue more of a light novel, sort of like a light novel aesthetic to it. Because back then I was sort of thinking, oh, I'll probably have these elements in all of my stories. So I'll start off strong with the first one, and then sort of make it as like the mainstay throughout. And yeah, it paid off really well. It was really time consuming, but the results show it. So I'm really happy with how they came out, and from what I've heard, it's just nothing but good things from everyone who's read it. It really sets the mood and pretty much what I was going for with it.
Yeah, I completely agree. I very much think like because sometimes illustrations can pull away from the story itself, but I feel like everything was put in and like it all complemented each other perfectly. Like you have them walking down the hallways of the dilapidated building, or not building, but ship. You have the black and white aspect of it. I think it all like played a really good role in it. And I remember when I first started reading it, I didn't realize that there would be these images. Then I hit the first one and I was like, it really helps, like, because they're not just regular gas masks that they're wearing or anything like that. Like they have the whole suit, they have the whole mock-up, and it's cool to actually see, like, obviously as a reader you'll have your own interpretation, but it's cool to see how it's actually, I guess, someone else's interpretation of it as well.
Yeah, definitely. All that the main inspiration for that, as well as light novels, was from the Horus Heresy books, where each one would have like a few illustrations from like drawn from in-universe characters called remembrances, which are like historians really. But like just see like a few images scattered throughout, it reach like a critical point in the story, and then you turn the page and you see like a cool like mock-up of like what happened or something, or like a really awesome like sketched illustration of a critical character that just like sort of gives a face to like the words and stuff that they're saying. And I really wanted to try and capture that with Mark Paternity, obviously with more of a like more like a scenic aesthetic to it. That's to set the movie, I suppose.
And speaking of scene and setting the mood, I was really impressed the whole way through by the sense, and I said this to you before the interview began, this sense that everything's just falling apart, everything's decaying, everything's breaking down. There's a real sense of urgency and a time limit to it. And it's a bold choice to open any story with a dream sequence. Spoilers to anyone who's not read Mark of Eternity, by the way. But even in the introduction, I could forgive that it was a dream sequence, given how Eve is disintegrated by acid at the very start of the novel. And then that fear of things breaking apart, whether it's the family itself or the rover that they live in or the ship that they're going to rely on, or even just the satellite that they're trying to get up to in the sky, you know. There's a sense that everything's just about to break down. And given the pace and length of the story, I thought that played excellently into it. So I guess my question there is, was that deliberate?
Kind of, yeah. It was definitely a risk to take the dream sequence. I know, like, they have a really big negative stigma, understandable. So that's why I was sort of like, all right, let's try and make this quick and to the point. Try and get the characters established and stuff. Sort of like develop like the world as well while I'm doing. I was just trying to do as much as I could with the dream sequence. So not just then she woke up and it's like, oh, okay, that's kind of pointless, but. You know, I wanted to do as much character building and world building and really set the scene for the story to follow, as well as to really show the grisly end that pretty much awaits anything that exists on Concord, really.
Yeah, absolutely. It certainly set the scene and set the vibe really well. So the other thing that I wanted to ask was, because we're getting into kind of spoiler territory now, so I guess we can have like a before and after spoiler segment. And from this point on, so the first thing I'd like to ask is the ending to Mark of Eternity. Firstly, who do you think you are? Secondly, what so what happens next? Is there going to be a sequel? Are we going to find out what happens next? Was that what made you think you had the right to do that? Explain.
I'll be perfectly honest, I had no idea why I did it that way. I guess it was just to really just shock the reader and just make him go like, what? Like, like, you serious? That's it? But
It worked.
So yeah, I definitely do intend on writing a follow-up to it. I've actually I've already written the prologue for it, but it's just currently on hold for now while I finish this current manuscript that I'm doing. But yeah, it's definitely, I got like a really good idea of how I want things to go. You know, it'll be a few years down the tracks, so it won't be baby Eve anymore. It'll be normal Eve, so I don't have to worry about trying to make her sound normal and when she's only 10. It's like, okay, how to not make this line of dialogue annoying. That was half the problem.
Well, I think it's also like from my perspective as a reader, I didn't know what was going to happen. Like there was definitely a section of the book where I was like, okay, Nisma's just going to abandon these people. She's pissed. Like she does not want to be here anymore. And it was the moment where I think you mentioned, or one of them mentioned the weight. Like it's too heavy,
Oh,
still too heavy. And then it started clicking for me. I was like, oh no, this is what's happening. But like I really didn't know until it happened. And then it really does all come down to the wire because unfortunately, you've left Eli missing a leg, I believe missing fingers. They've just used up the rover's last like battery cell. So they don't have any actual resources. Like that when the sun sets, so like that's it. It's not gonna rise again. Um and then all of this is in the hopes that there's something out there because from a reader's perspective, like there's no obligation on you to write the follow-up stories. So from the reader's perspective, like, all right, you've been shot into space because it matches with the parents, because the parents are never going to know what happened, or that from our perspective are never going to know what happened to their daughter. They did it in the hopes that it could be better than what's awaiting them on Concord. So I thought that was, especially with I really liked how you had the family dynamic playing throughout, because it really was like a believable family. Like, obviously, we all hope that families don't fight that much, but you also have to give them the added stress of being on an abandoned planet that actively wants to kill you, for lack of a better word. So like they have all those other stresses and pressures, but yeah, just overall, like I think it fit. And you think about the parents' perspective and you think about E's perspective, and they're both just harrowing. Like there's no one that's better than the other, in my opinion.
Yeah, it was really difficult to try and balance everything. Um, Especially trying not antagonize one parent more than the other. Because I wanted to give them both their valid reasons and valid arguments and all that, as well as have Eve chip in her like 2 cents as well. So it was very difficult, and I guess because the story doesn't really have an antagonist. Like I've had some people say like, oh, Nisma's the antagonist or Eli's the antagonist, but really it's just like it's more of the world itself. Because before, when I first started it, there were like other people alive on the planet. Like they sort of would have formed some like Mad Max sort of like thing. But then I figured, no, that wouldn't really work. And then it would sort of take away from the family dynamic. So I got rid of all that and then just pretty much made it more focused on just the three last humans on Concord really, and like their dynamic. And yeah, it took a lot of tweaking, a lot of fiddling around, but eventually I got there, and then yeah, we got the finished product, and
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean that's following up from that, because we had a question from one of our subscribers asking like how was it the case of only one family surviving. I think I remember reading how it was basically like a radioactive wasteland after the crash happened, and there would have been stragglers surviving on the ship itself, but then it seems like they all just kind of died off, and that this family, or yeah, this family are the ones that basically got lucky with the rover through their like connections or whatever it may be, like their work placements or whatnot.
Yeah, it really like yeah, a big good portion of the passengers did die on the landing, like through either kinetic means or radiation means or this the wet the atmosphere of the world and stuff that would have culled most of them. But then there would have obviously been other people aside from Eve, Nisma, and Eli who would have found masks and supplies and stuff. But the key was really the rover, because um, it really comes back to the ship only wanting like a small group of people to survive. The ship didn't want everyone to survive, so that's why Nisma, as well as her connections as in being an engineer, she was the only one who was able to secure a working rover. And like the ship sort of just left everyone else to die, so then it can enact its plan with as minimal interference as possible from like other parties.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think the idea of having the ship as another main character in this, I found really interesting. Like when you're reading and then it kind of jumps to this like different font and everything, and you realize that it's this AI or computer or whatnot speaking. I found that really unique because it added like a different, is that the antagonist? Is that the one that's orchestrating all of this? But I was gonna ask, like, because then that kind of molded its way into Spud and everything like that. Is there, when Eve does get sent off into space with Spud, is that the whole, without spoiling too much what you have on your plate right now, is that the whole like Eve and Spud, the next big buds for a space adventure?
Yeah, pretty much. So in a few years down the line, both Eve and Spud would be a bit more matured. Spud won't just be a head anymore, so he'll actually be able to do more than lie there and beep and boop at times. But yeah, the part of the ship that Spud took on with him, it's like it's not really AI, but it's sort of like a bit leaning into the fantasy realm, but it's like half. So it is its own like sentience, but like it's not really like, as you said, it's not really like the antagonist either, because it has also suffered from 10,000 years of imprisonment aboard the Eternity, and all it wanted to do was to just get out. Like it wanted to be free again, and it saw Spud as its best chance to get off the planet.
And that was how I interpreted it as well. The whole idea of like not necessarily just like something that almost seems to have a soul, like it's an actual being in whatever form that may be, and also in survival mode, exactly that.
And
Yeah,
so without, sorry, on you go.
No, sorry, I forgot. I already forgot my answer.
Well, I was going to ask, like, to the extent that you're comfortable sharing this information, because we don't want to spoil your future work, obviously. But what can we expect in the future from you? What you're working on just now? I know I've seen a couple of things that you've posted on Twitter about what you're working on and the ideas that you've had out in the Australian outback, away from society. But tell us a little bit about what you're working on just now.
Yeah. So let me just say, spending a month out in the middle of nowhere with nothing but a notepad and pen in my very bored brain gets a lot more work done than I actually do in Civilization, funnily enough. But so what I'm currently working on now, it changed, as typical with everything I write, it changes formats. I'm currently leaning towards an epic, but then it might go back to becoming a trilogy. But it's really about two women from completely different like backgrounds undergoing their own like form of like coming of age birthrights, as I call them. So you'd have one of them which is pretty much like the typical like noble, like child of a nobleman whose like entire background is based upon military service and like unimpeded service through like her family's lineage for like millennia, like which has in turn garnered like great respect and massive rewards for her family. But it also means that each generation has like a crushing responsibility to maintain the status quo of what they have to do, really.
Is that Elizabeth that you're talking about by any chance?
Yes, it is. That is Elizabeth.
Yeah,
And,
I've seen in your tweets the kind of thing. See, I'm everywhere. I've got eyes everywhere. No, that's really cool, man. I've seen you talk about the kind of situations that she might get put in, and it sounds like if that's in the same universe as Mark of Eternity, that's very interesting. I'm excited to see where that goes.
it is. It's actually happening at roughly the same time. So
Well, that's
maybe a
especially
bit of
interesting. Yeah.
maybe a bit of interaction. But then there's also I got to do the other half of the plot justice. This is the one that's been given me the biggest headache is there's another character, Miku, who's sort of like drawn from heavily from like Japanese folklore and stuff. And she like sort of lives on like a world that's stuck in the feudal age, that's under the protection of the coalition. And they, like her entire people, like they give up their firstborn child to the coalition, like as thanks for their protection and their like benevolence towards them. As for what happens to said children, well, you just have to read and find out, I suppose. But both Elizabeth and Miku will eventually intersect at some point, and it doesn't go well for either of them.
That doesn't seem like much of a spoiler, given that it's you that's writing it, my man.
Dark.
It's going to go terribly for everyone. Yeah.
I love those terrible endings.
I mean, terrible endings or not, like I read the book months ago and it's still an ending I think about. I think it definitely plays a role in that. It makes it so much more memorable. Yeah, there's moments where I read that and I'm like, why, how, who dare, how dare he? But in terms of the impression that it leaves, it's one that you continue to think about and all the implications of that and what it could mean and this and that. So I'm definitely a big fan of heavy hitting endings. So Mark of Eternity definitely hit that note in a really unique way.
Yeah, I wanted to try and make therefore I wanted to try and get an ending that wasn't expected, which obviously was the case. Like I wanted to try and I hinted at it throughout the story. Like you obviously would have noticed like some bits where it's like, oh wait, is Nisma gonna do this, or is like Eli gonna do this or something? I wanted to like hint at it. It was really hard to try and not make it too obvious early on. I was worried like throughout, I was thinking, oh no, did I screw up? I spilled the beans like 100 pages out from the ending or something. But nah, so
No, you didn't.
Yeah, definitely for those unexpected endings that sort of leave readers going, oh, what?
Oh, valid. And a bit of a different question here. I was actually curious, how did you have to do any research for this regarding like the science behind it? Because I know it's like your own created planet and everything like that. But like I remember at one point you're talking about pH levels and all of that. I was wondering like how much research you actually did end up putting into it, or if this is just things you already knew or made up, or
So I drew a lot of it from high school chemistry. So we did a lot of I don't know, me and my lab mate were really bad with acids. We'd actually get into acid fights with each other where we'd be flicking hydrochloric acid at each other. And so there's a lot of yeah, so I didn't need lots of experience with the rain in that regard. And the rest of it is just like just general. Like I know a lot about space sort of stuff as well. It's really big in my family and all that. So a lot of it just came natural to me. And then obviously taken a fair bit from sci-fi settings as well. Obviously it's inspiration, aliens, and plenty of 40K stuff, and just like generic sci-fi.
The 40K stuff came through pretty strong in the scale, I think. Not just the time, but like the size of the ship, how many people are on it, that kind of thing. Also, how dangerous artificial intelligence can be, I guess. But I definitely got the sense of that vast, uncaring universe, just full of terrible things happening all the time. But it seemed almost like more like apocalyptic than 40K, which is tough to do. But it seemed like everything was just a mess everywhere.
Yeah, it really was just like grim and hopeless. Like there wasn't really any coming back from it. Like the planet was screwed beyond like saving, really. Like it was just a matter of surviving long enough, and then like the fact that they would like Nisma would have even considered something like a satellite, which could have been just a rock in space, or like a chunk of the eternity that just floats in orbit. Like, just for her to even consider it as like a viable means of survival, it I really wanted to get across like just how bleak and like desperate they were.
Man, I didn't even think about it being as like a remnant of the eternity. Now my mind is wandering like, oh, what if she just got sent to space and it's just a piece of junk? Oh,
That was my
no.
This flew into a chunk of metals out there.
Yes, there's no one there. It's all for nothing. That's where I thought the ending was going, and then when it never really cleared it up, I was like, I'm going to have words about this. But if I know that Eve is in a story in the future, that's enough for me to know that that's all. That's okay. Something, whatever happens, she's going to be in another story.
Yeah, there wasn't a pile of junk in space, so there is more. There is more to follow. So yeah, no need to worry about that.
I think a lot of people will be reassured to hear that. So unfortunately, I'm checking. It looks like we got 3 minutes and counting left. If there's anything you want to say, what's the best way for people to find you? What's the best way for people to get a hold of you, support you?
So I did have a bunch of socials and a website, and then all of them sort of fell to the wayside. Aside from, it's not called Twitter now, is it X? That's the only.
I'm still calling it Twitter.
Yeah, I'm still calling it Twitter, but Twitter X, whatever you call it, that's what I'm most active on, like trying to keep the algorithm happy. So, what's my hand? I think it's at Zach Moulder, no caps, I believe. You'll know it's me because you'll see this face with aviators and a black jacket standing on top of Mount Kosciuszko. That's the dude.
Perfect. Because we'll put that in the description, so don't worry. But
awesome. Now, that's the main way to find me. Otherwise,
all right, cool. Because I think we're all looking forward to seeing what you have in store for us. And the moment you do, please, I know you're going to, but just tell the world because we all want to see it.
No, absolutely. Once it's in a state where I'm happy to show other people, which may be a while, but definitely I'll be announcing it to everyone, like straight up. Like this, I love doing this sort of stuff, and just to see how all the good reactions that people have had with my first story is just only encouraged me even more.
But more than anything, just want to say thank you for your time today, and really just thank you for participating and featuring and being a part of this. I think it's moments like these where we actually get more insight from the authors themselves and get to actually, like read indie books that are fantastic, that really break the mold of what you'd see in a traditional book and everything. Like, so just thank you for going out on a limb, trying something new, participating in the interview. Mark of Eternity was fantastic, and we're so excited for everything that's to come.
No, it was great. Thank you so much for having me. And obviously Steve was the one who found me, left that awesome glowing review. And he was, when he reached out to me, I was like, why not? He actually gave my book a go. So I figured, I'll see how it goes. Like, I'm not never really in it for the money or anything. It's just more of just showing people a story that I hope they like. So I'm glad you guys are able to do that for me.
No, we loved it.
Finding great stories is what it's all about, man.
Well, thank you again. I'm going to end this before it cuts us off because it says less than a minute left. But take